Just want to acknowledge today I'm coming to you today from the shared territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations, and we're really pleased at the number of people that responded to the invitation. I know that it went out just about a week ago, and so we were curious what the feedback would be, whether people would be looking for something interesting to talk about, which we think, of course, infrastructure is really interesting to talk about, or you may be tired of these Zoom meetings and say, I've had enough of this. I don't want to do another one, but we're really, again, happy that you've taken the time out of your day to talk about this. I think people from as far west as Esquimalt, which is even further west than Sayout, Alan, and as far east as Tobique, and I think even further east in Buckingeg. So really pleased, and lots of places in between. Look forward to the day again when we are able to travel a little bit and see your beautiful territories. Again, today I'm coming to you from Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam territory, and to start the day in a good way, just wanted to introduce Alan Claxton. Claxton is currently serving as the Development Board Chair of the First Nations Infrastructure Institute. Alan has a lot of experience dealing with infrastructure projects. For his community, he served 20 years as chief for his community of Sayo, and he served another 10 years as counselor. Alan's also served on the Chiefs Committee for Health, both regionally and nationally. So, to get our day started, I want to pass it over to Alan.
Thank you, Jason, for those kind words. Don't those bios make people look so wonderful, eh? I wish I could hear my bio more often. Actually, I don't. Anyway, welcome everyone I'm from the Sayout First Nation, and we would like to acknowledge my nation as well as the other nations where each of you are today and the presenters. I hope that you're all staying safe and healthy and happy. I just remember approximately 11 months ago when Jason and I were flying out of Toronto, and then very quickly after that, the country was shut down because of the COVID. And so it's been a different world since then. It's been very complex and difficult for a lot of people. And we had to carry on this important work. So that's how we got into Zoom. And all this technology is very complicated for someone like me, an old school fellow. And now we're into the webinar. So it's another learning experience for me. And so I'd just like to move forward now by saying a quick prayer for everyone that's here today. And thank you for making time to be in this webinar meeting today. And we look forward to a very productive meeting. I'm grateful to everyone that's here today. Let us pray for your families and your communities, from the very young to the elders. For those, especially those struggling with their wellness journey, as is one of our board members today, our prayers and thoughts are with him. The COVID pandemic has presented many challenges, as I've said, both physically and mentally. There's a lot of loneliness out there and sadness, but we're going to get through this by supporting each other. Let's pray for those frontline workers who are working to keep us safe and to keep us healthy. And for all of us here today, let's have clear minds so we can do the best and carry out this important work. So with that, HKCM, thank you very much, and I'll turn it back over to Jason.
Thank you very much, Alan. And again, welcome to this first of 5 in our Shovel Ready webinar series. As Alan mentioned, we put this series together because, now in times of COVID, we can't get together the way we used to. But the challenges we face with infrastructure have not gone away, and we thought these webinars would be an opportunity to talk about how to address some of the infrastructure challenges. It'd be an opportunity to talk about closing the infrastructure gap, And I'm just looking at the results here. I think Davis has shared the results. It looks like 10 people have responded, and lots of you are thinking about doing projects in your communities. And it looks like some of you have projects that are shovel ready, but some of you think that there's maybe a little bit more work to be done. So we're really looking forward to talking about what shovel ready means and thinking about how to get projects shovel ready. So and again, quick housekeeping note. Again, encourage you to use the chat function. We are being joined today by another member of the Finney Development Board, Joe Muskokeman from Chippewas of the Thames. Um, and we're happy that he's able to join us here today. Over the past year, we've been working to develop the First Nation Infrastructure Institute. Just like for tax, we have the First Nation Tax Commission. And for financial management, we have the Financial Management Board, the FMB. And for access to capital, we have the FNFA. The experience of these three institutions has demonstrated the need for an infrastructure focused institute. And that's the idea behind Finney, FNII. We call it Finney for short. To establish a First Nation led institute that could be infrastructure focused, to be a center of excellence, and to support improved outcomes. And the development board, of whom Alan and Joe are both members, are leaders from across the country. We're happy that Keith Matthews also joined us. Welcome, Keith. He's also on the development board. And they've stepped forward really to provide guidance and leadership as we develop the ideas behind the Institute. So at this time, I want to provide an opportunity for some opening remarks from Joe Muskokeman. Joe, just by way of introduction, has served his community, Chippewas of the Thames, for 14 years as chief and another 10 years as councillor. In addition to that, he served as chief of the Anishinaabe Nation for 12 years, and we're grateful for Joe's leadership with us here at Finney. So welcome, Joe.
Thank you very much, Jason, for those kind words. And I'd like to also thank Chairman Claxton for his opening remarks and his opening prayer. I'm sure everybody has been faced with this challenge equally across the country, perhaps some more than others. I'm concerned with our fellow chief from Manitoba that unfortunately he's unable to join us today because of some personal issues that he has to attend to. But importantly, there has been, as I'm sure everyone has heard, the outbreak in Manitoba and within his territory. And we certainly wish all of these people well and safety and hope for a speedy recovery for all of them. I'm particularly pleased that we have participants joining in with us so that we can outline some of the challenges that all of us have faced in leadership or in our communities when trying to describe what infrastructure means to us and how, in fact, we've been trying to prepare our communities for the future and plan ahead, not in short stopgap kinds of measures, but in a more holistic way in which is going to embrace growth and prosperity within our communities. And so we see this as a very essential piece of work that needs to get done, and that we need to put our arms around our fellow community members and our fellow communities, our First Nation communities, and wanting to inform the membership, our people, what the benefits will be. And they may not be in the immediate future. I mean, everything goes through its growing pains, just like, it's taken us far longer than what we would like to have done in terms of legislative development. But I mean, we can only push government so fast, so far at any one time. But we're hopeful that we're able to have a piece of legislation ready to go in the not too distant future. And hopefully it gets in before the session ends within the next short time. I like to just inform the participants where Chippewa the Thames First Nation is. We're halfway between Toronto and Detroit on the 401 corridor, which is one of the busiest commercial corridors in Canada. And we are the second most southerly community in all of Canada, First Nation community. So we've been having exposure to huge commercial and technical growth around us, while in fact, as Jason and the chairman will remember, and is true within our community and other First Nations alike, that in the summertime, I'm not going to be able to be on Zoom, simply because the broadband isn't large enough in order to be able to carry Zoom in the summertime because of the foliage and trees around us. And so it becomes imperative and important that when we deal with infrastructure, it's not just about pipes in the ground. It's just not about, the kind of basic needs that, but what we're looking at in terms of infrastructural development also has to go to the technological development that our communities are going to require. I'll go on more about that a little bit, Jason, but I don't want to get off too far on a tangent, but I certainly welcome everyone to this discussion. And I think it's important that we think big and not small when we talk about infrastructure and how we're going to develop for the future of our community. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman and Jason, and I'll turn it back to you. Miigwech.
Thanks very much, Joe, for those opening comments. And it's interesting that I know the discussions we've had about infrastructure can encompass a lot of different things, right? From water to sewer to connectivity to health to education to roads. There's a lot of different aspects to infrastructure, but some of the key planning parts of it we think can apply to these different asset classes. And so some of the things we want to talk about today, I think that what does make a project shovel ready it doesn't, whether it's internet connectivity, whether it's water, whether it's a health center, some of these things apply, we think, to all those types of assets. So I'm gonna share screen here for a sec. Hopefully this works okay. Is that working okay? Can you see the slide that says let's talk business case?
Yep, it's available.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, I'll take that as a so I just want to talk about a couple of slides here, and this is kind of, I think, what we're getting at when we say, what's shovel ready. The shovel ready would have a number of planning aspects prepared, and we like to call it a business case for a project. You may have another name that you call for it, project plan or things, but this is kind of the terminology, or at least the language we've been starting to use. And the business case is really a one-stop shop to describe a project, and it allows people, whether it's the people who you're trying to get to build the project, whether it's the lenders that you may be working with, whether it's your membership that you need to engage with. There may be a number of different audiences for this plan, but it allows people to understand what the project's all about, understand the rationale and the process you're going to use. And it's comprised of a few different parts. The strategic case, and that's really the why. Why are you doing the project? The economic case, and this is, I think, where people probably a lot of familiarity with a feasibility study that often gets done for projects. The commercial case, which is, if you're going to go out and find a company to try and work with you to deliver the project, how you procure the project. I know this term procurement get used a lot and maybe the source of confusion sometimes. Um, but that's where we're going to talk about procurement, how the request for proposal will work and how you will get bids for the project. The financial case, that's really the financial plan, which is, I think we really wanted to focus on not just the construction cost of the project, but there's costs leading up to construction, there's the actual construction, and then there's the operation and maintenance, and how are all of those costs figured into the plan, and also, of course, how are the revenues figured into the plan to pay for the costs over time, so that you have a sustainable and a good life cycle for the project. Last but certainly not least is the management case, which is how are you going to manage the project on an ongoing basis. I would say if you're trying to frantically write stuff down here, don't panic. We have these slides. We're happy to share the slides with you. And in fact, we want to provide something to you after by way of email, which is a little bit more detail about each of these things. So don't feel stressed that you're having to write stuff down from the screen. So maybe I'll just, if it's okay, I'll just talk a little bit more about each of these parts. And then after I've talked about the business case ingredients, we'll turn it back over to Alan and to Joe to talk about their experience in getting their projects ready. And then after they have a chance to talk about it, we'll open it up for questions and answers. So that's the kind of agenda here today. So I won't take too long going over these slides, but I think it's quite helpful just thinking through, the strategic case, again, the why. A lot of communities, and we were interested to see who was participating in the call today and what your roles and responsibilities were at your different nations. But it looks like some of you are in housing, in capital, acting within the band administration, and you may be familiar with different strategic plans or land use plans or capital plans or even a comprehensive community plan. And all of those things would be really helpful, I think, in informing the why of the project, because the more that the project responds to community priorities, we think the better the project is gonna be, obviously. I know I was talking to Joe yesterday about this session, and he was saying, well, what if you don't have a comprehensive community plan? Does that mean you have to wait till you have a comprehensive community plan to even start a project? The answer to that, I think, is no. You don't have to have all these plans in place. I mean, if you did, it would be helpful. In my mind, the key thing here is that there has to be real collaboration and community involvement right throughout from the start about why you're doing the project. And to the extent that you have some of those plans in place, that would be helpful. But again, I don't think it necessarily means you can't start the project. The economic case, if I go on to that, again, I think people are probably familiar with the feasibility studies that get done as part of that. But we've been working on a project with the community, a water and wastewater project, and we found through the feasibility study there's quite a bit of work and thinking about how to frame that feasibility study. So what goes into the request for proposals to actually get the study done, and how is that informed by the current system operators, by the plans you may have by the current administration, and then how do you evaluate bids for the feasibility study to come in, and then what are the issues you're looking at in the feasibility. There could be technology options, there could be location options, for example, like where does the water plant go. There could be distribution or collection network decisions to be made. And so that economic case is going to look at the different options that you have there, and hopefully come up with, you probably again heard of this idea of a Class C estimate, or you're going to have some indicative cost estimate, and it's going to help really set the stage for what the plan is going to be for when the project actually gets built. So I'm going to move on now to the commercial case. The commercial case is about analyzing how you're going to select a company to partner with if you're not going to do the project completely on your own, and you may want to work with an engineering firm or a construction firm, how are you going to select the firm that you're going to work with? And what are the criteria by which you might select the people who bid on your project? It also includes some aspects of what responsibilities you want the company to take on or the partner to take on, and what responsibilities you want to maintain yourself as your nation's responsibility. And so, this whole process of thinking about the options for how you pick companies and thinking about the options for the responsibilities, sometimes that gets called procurement options analysis, which is a bit of a mouthful, I know, but there's these different models of procurement with different, different benefits and different costs. So it's worthwhile thinking through the different options and how they meet your objectives, and so that's an important part. And one of the things we've heard, one of the things we understand, with the current ISK process, there is not much flexibility in procurement. You're stuck with the design, bid, build, which could be work well, but it may be worth thinking about different options there. And of course, it leads to, in that analysis, development of documents like the request for proposals that you might develop for the project to select a partner. So I'm sure there'll be more discussion about that. And again, I know we're having one webinar today. We really encourage you to hopefully come back and join us again in the subsequent webinars, because we're going to have another 4 after this. The first couple, we're going to talk about these planning aspects, but the last 3, we wanted to start talking a little bit more detail about, examples of projects, because I find, for myself anyway, sometimes having an example makes it a little bit easier to understand than talking, in the abstract like this a little bit. So, an ability to think about procurement, like what would work well for a water system? What are the options that might work well? What are the options that might work well for a health center or a multi-purpose community facility? I think I encourage you to just check back with us as we have those future webinars. The financial case is, again, the financial model for people who like spreadsheets. It's super exciting. For most people, it's not. But it's doing from the construction costs, again, through to the operation and maintenance, and matching up the costs to the amount of funding. That matching is really tricky. Sometimes you don't have the money at the time when you need the money. And so sometimes a way to address that matching is to use financing tools. And, again, being part, of the Fiscal Management Act, using the tools of the Fiscal Management Act, whether it's local revenue tools, whether it's access to capital through the First Nation Finance Authority. These tools could really help, we think, you match up the revenues to the costs. Last but not least, sorry, and I'll stop talking shortly here, is the management case. And this is so important, just about how the project is going to get governed. I know governance can be a bit of a trigger for us sometimes, not like big governance. This is like, how are we going to make decisions about this project, on the way through, and the timelines for implementing the project. Certainly, we've heard a lot, the desire for local participation and capacity building, and how can our members be included in the project, whether it's in the construction or in the ongoing operation and maintenance. So those are again, I'll just maybe come back to the summary. It's a one-stop shop to understand your project. It has some different aspects to it. If we had all these parts, we think in a plan, we think that would give our plan the best chance to be shovel ready, and the best chance to have, whether it's companies want to work with us, whether it's lenders want to work with us, whether it's funders want to work with us. We think having this work done gives our project the best chance for success. And so I'm going to stop sharing screen now. And again, we're happy to make these slides available for you. I just want to pause now after having talked a little bit about what shovel ready means, and give an opportunity to Joe Muskokoman first, and then Alan Claxton, and to talk a little bit about I think their experience, which is a lot of experience planning projects and getting them ready and getting the due diligence done, what are the challenges you may have faced, and what are the, I guess the other thing is, what are the opportunities for us to overcome these challenges using better tools so we can close that gap. So over to you, Joe.
Thank you very much, Jason. That was a good intro into part of what we're trying to do as we develop this organization. And I don't think it's any news to any of the participants on this webinar that the process that we're currently in is a long and protracted and very narrow way of managing or operating infrastructural projects from the government's side. And there is a number of challenges that come with that. Just as an example, just prior to this call, I contacted an engineer that's been mainly in the water and wastewater management projects within First Nations throughout Ontario for a number of years. He's been in the engineering world for well over 10 years, if not 15 years, managing projects and helping First Nations manage projects. And we had a very brief discussion about what are some of the impediments, some of the barriers that he finds from the technical side. So you've got to remember that these engineering consultants that we hire really can only push as hard as the First Nation can push, because Indian Affairs or ISC, they literally pay no attention to the engineers. They have a set of a format in which they go. So it was interesting just on the polling, and I just want to refer to that for a second, that the first question is how many are planning for a for infrastructure development? 90% said yes. And then I said, how many are ready? And that said 30%. Maybe a better question, or another question that we should have asked, was how long did it take you in the planning side to get 90% ready for for this infrastructure project? Because it's been my experience that in order to walk through the steps as they currently exist, from feasibility to eventual shovel readiness, a feasibility study itself in the current state of existence could take up to 5 years to be done, because you don't get enough money offhand. You get dribs and drabs, you get pre-feasibility money, you get a little bit of money to hire an engineer, you do a little bit of consulting work, you do an evaluation on your existing system if you have one, or how in fact, and all of this then leads to a long, protracted, drawn out process. And currently, it can take up to 5 years just to get on the radar for ISC to have an infrastructural project like water. And after that, that's when you actually begin. And so from there, it's not unusual at all, that many communities are in this planning process that we currently exist anywhere from 15 to 20 years. Think of that, 15 to 20 years. And the way the planning process is worked out is that the standards in which are being applied today may change very much in the future. You may be planning for something based on today's numbers. They may not get to you for 10 to 15 years. And already you're undersized. You're undersized. The amount of water is taken by a residential household. It takes into no consideration whatsoever for commercial or industrial growth. If you have plans about doing industrial and commercial growth, the current rule is we don't fund that. We fund for residential purposes. The current formulas for funding are dependent upon really the size of the community and the number of households that you have. And they're taken from the current existence to the growth pattern of your community and so on. Well, in my community, we've got over 50% of our membership living off reserve. Probably a third of that 50% is within 20 miles that want to come home. Through a housing program that we started some 20 years ago, we are now starting just to get into the fair market housing. And a house not far from where I live, a relatively small house, was financed to a new owner for $200,000. And so now there's beginning to have a market, a fair market starting within the community. And that fair market is going to continue to grow because the demands are so great that those people that left our communities 15, 20, 30 years ago have now acquired some wealth. And they want to return home for their retirement. They want to move back. And so there's a resurgence of people coming back, not necessarily exiting the community, but wanting to come back. Does that planning process take into account those middle-aged, perhaps well-educated people that we want to bring back into our community for capacity, human resource development and capacity building? Does that attract our own people back home? At the current stage, it does not. So you have a planning process that is weak, that is not responsive, deals in data that is insufficient in the current marketplace, and are expected now to try to retain and bring back people into our own so we can build our own economy. Not counting the technological deficit that I spoke of earlier. You know, I don't want to occupy this whole time because I could really talk about this for a long time because it's been something that I've feel very passionate about. But when you take to the extent that, and many of you probably don't know this, and I know this because I've had discussions with senior management on budgetary allocations to regions, not the First Nations, to regions, and many of the First Nations do not know that the minor capital budget has been rated constantly ever since the 2% cap on education has been in place, and that money that is discretionary money is taken out in order to pay for things like master tuition agreements. So I know in Ontario, my figures may be dated on this a bit because I've not been in the position of chief for the last 5 years in my community, so they may have changed. I recognize that. But over 5 years ago, the capital that was allocated to Ontario was somewhat in the neighborhood of $250 million. What was actually spent was $175 million. So the question went, where did the other 75 million go? And the answer was A big chunk of it went into education, to pay for education that they were under budgeted in because of the cap. And another fairly significant chunk, like $25 million, was returned back to Ottawa because the bureaucracy could not approve these projects and could not get them off the ground. And they were deferred. Rather than taken up and put into another First Nation, they were actually returned. How stupid is that? There's no other way to talk about it. It's failed. Those people go home in Toronto at night and live a very, very good life. Our people go home at night without water. Who would you rather have manage? Them or us? Or more importantly, you. I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks for those comments, Joe. And yeah, I mean, I've heard the stories as well. I don't have numbers, but of funding allocations made and then the funding not going to the projects for variety of reasons. Maybe it could be because there's another emergency that comes up for a particular thing. Could be because they can't find it's the situation that seems to happen often where it's late in the fiscal year and there's money that becomes available, and if your project's not ready with the feasibility study that's up to date, we've heard this story too, you get a feasibility study done and then it's the funding's not there, and then time passes and then the money comes available, but now your feasibility study's out of date, and you're in this cycle, right, of trying to get now you got to go back and redo your feasibility study. So I think what certainly what we hope with with Finney is really focusing on that planning, that upfront work that can help get the projects shovel ready, so that when the time comes, when funding is available, that our projects are ready to go. And maybe this is something that I meant to say a little bit earlier, but with the COVID-19 pandemic, typically what happens in economic downturns is we see investments in infrastructure. And we expect that with the pandemic happening, this is something like we've never seen before, but we expect that there will be stimulus spending, in the coming months and the coming years to recover from this COVID-19 pandemic. And so the funding's being made available. We saw the announcement yesterday that the Canada Infrastructure Bank was looking to make funds available for indigenous projects. What are the projects that are going to get funded? What are the ones that are ready to go? And how can nations really work on those plans to get the projects ready, so when the opportunity comes, if there is funding available, we're able to be just like other Canadians in other parts of the country, take advantage of that investment so that we can be part of the recovery as well. And we need, just like Joe said, not just, people are worried about maybe their Zoom connection's a little off. Like, we need water, roads, sewer, internet connectivity. Like, we need these things to participate in the COVID-19 recovery. So thanks, Joe, for those comments. And I know we're going to have a chance to ask Joe some questions as well. But maybe before we do, I'll pause and ask Alan Claxton to maybe reflect. I know Alan's community early adopter of many tools that have become available, and a leader, and whether it's land management, whether it's fiscal management, whether it's using revenue sources like GST. They've really found innovative ways to use tools to respond to their community priorities. So I look forward to hearing from Alan. Over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Jason. So when I'm thinking about infrastructure, I think about when I was a boy living in my community here. And back then we were on well water. And when I think about that well water, it was the coldest, tastiest water that you could ever imagine. And it's really enjoyed a nice glass of water back then. We also had outhouses, which were, depending what time of the year, wasn't an easy thing. especially if it was freezing outside. Our roads were dirt and dusty, and got to the point where they would oil the roads, which became very messy, and that made you wish for the dust. And so those were all we needed back in those days, but times change. And when I was the chief, one of the first things I did was take over the sewer treatment plant that was owned by the municipality. And the reason I did that was because I didn't have to go begging the municipality for downstream capacity through that sewer treatment plant if we owned it. So we were looking into commercial development for the betterment of our community. And we were close at one point when we were working with a big developer and had a big 20-acre project with the big box stores. And just when we were ready to sign the deal, the big box industry collapsed, and so did our deal. So thinking about with that, the sewer treatment plant now, back then, when we took it over, still needs upgrades, and they're not cheap. And so, as Jason said, you go through study after study and study after study, so that those upgrades still haven't been done to this day. And second, I think about when I was a boy as well, that we had a bridge coming into the community over the creek, the fish-bearing creek. Anyway, Indian Affairs at that time, and they've changed their names many times, but they're still very recognizable. They put a couple of big culverts in the creek and put a road over that creek. And over the years, that road is sinking and choking off the creek. So that's another need that we have. But the one I want to focus on is we always needed every community needs a good health facility. So I hired a consultant. We were back and forth to meeting with Health Canada. And over the course of a year, we finally got to the final meeting with their big shots in Ottawa. So myself and my consultant met and made our presentation. And then they looked at us and they said, "Okay, Chief, if you include a gymnasium in your health facility, you have a deal." So we immediately shook hands with them. Then we left the meeting and flew home. On the flight home, I was thinking to myself, how the heck am I going to pay for this? So it's a $10 million project. Anyway, I immediately called Manny Jules when I got home, and he introduced me to fiscal realities. And so they had a plan. They said, you opt out of the GST and form your own say-out tax. And so we began to negotiate with Finance Canada. And it took about a year to do. What we did, we formed our own say-out tax, opted out of the GST, because you have to opt out and opt into your own tax, just like instantly. And so with that created a revenue of $1.4 million a year. Bingo. That's how we got our gymnasium and health facility. And it was a smoother process doing that separate from the region here, because you just had to do your own due diligence. And we now have that beautiful health facility that everybody in the community loves, and especially in the winter season when we have lots of rain and cold, and gives the young people somewhere to go to release their energy. And so all of our communities have infrastructure needs, and going through Indian Affairs, like I used to like to call them, it's not a very speedy process. You can only deal with perhaps one of your infrastructure needs in a lifetime. The the cost is very high, and like I said about the ones they've done here, it's done very poorly, and we need to step forward and take jurisdiction of the needs of our community through our own local governments. So moving ahead, that's what we want to provide as Finney. We, as a team, we don't just represent people in our region. We represent the people in every region of First Nations in Canada, and every community and every individual. So looking forward, that's my story about infrastructure, and I'm very excited to serve as the chair to see that this work gets done. Thank you, Jason.
Great, thanks, Alan. Yeah, like it really fascinating example, of course, of thinking about how to put together a business case, essentially, is what you were doing for your facility, and you were looking for revenue from the federal government. You were looking at your own source revenue, and certainly those are the kinds of things that we think you might think about in terms of the financial case. See, some of your communities, tax may not be the approach that you want to take. Maybe a different approach. Maybe you have other own source revenue from businesses that you're operating, um, or maybe you have a settlement trust, for example, that's generating income that could be a contribution towards for some costs, right? So again, it's thinking through what are the different revenues you have, what are the different costs you have, how can you build a financial plan that's going to work for your community, and there's a number of different tools that are possible. Some of them may work better for your communities than others, and helping to put together those plans and using those tools. That's certainly, like Alan said, the idea behind Finney is to establish a national organization. Would be optional, so similar to the way the Fiscal Management Act works. It's not you don't have to use it. It's up to you if you'd like to use some of the tools. It would be similar to the way of working with the Financial Management Board or Tax Commission or FNFA. There's no cost to working with the proposed First Nation Infrastructure Institute. And again, it would help put together like that scenario that Alan's talking about, doing the planning, putting the business case together for his community, whether it's the situation Joe's talking about, trying to get this longer process of planning sped up, so you're ready for that funding that's available. That's, I think, the idea is Finney providing some tools, some templates, some best practices to support you at your choice. So I'll just pause there. I know Keith wasn't on the agenda, but he's like a special guest star at the webinar today, and we're really happy that Keith Matthew is joining us. He's also stepped forward as a development board member. He's going to say a few words, and I see Davis has just popped up our second poll there now, I think. So, now that we've had a chance to talk through some of these aspects, we wanted to revisit the question we asked before about whether you think your project's shovel ready, and then maybe drill a little bit into it. I love Joe's question too about, how long does it take, or what was the question? We got to add that one. How long did it take to get, ready? I think that's a great question for maybe a next webinar, but a couple of questions here. We'll let you try and answer those questions, and we'll pass it over to Keith, a leader in his community, a leader with CanDo, a lot of experience with ECDev, and we're really fortunate to have Keith's leadership here with us today.
Thank you, Jason. I won't take up too much of the time here. I want to hear what the community members have to say, but it's a real honor and a pleasure for me to work with the Finney board, and I'm really excited to be able to use some of my experience that I've learned across many platforms and over 30 years of experience of working in First Nations politics and helping our communities achieve their goals. So, all of us have needs in our own communities around infrastructure, and I see some of them that are being flashed up here on the screen on the chat, and it's really interesting to me to see how much of an intersection we all have around needs in our communities. And it was over 20 years ago now that I worked with Manny on the Financial Management Act and helping get that brought to the House of Commons along with Chief Claxton and Chief Muskokamon. And we worked really hard to get that Financial Management Act in place. And it was a real struggle because a lot of our communities are very hesitant about change. And as you've heard from both Chief Claxton and Chief Muskokamon, it takes a lot of work to not only find money and resources, but to plan these things properly. So, you know, we were successful in getting the Financial Management Act in place, and the creation of the FNFA, the First Nation Tax Commission, and the other financial institution were created. And, you know, those institutions have helped us immeasurably in managing the issues in our community for a better quality of life for all of our people. So in my community, just as a couple of examples, we need to upgrade our water treatment facility, and we need to refurbish it because it produces clean drinking water, but there's a heavy calcium in the that gets left over, and it really clogs up all of our washing machines and our dishwashers and all sorts of things in our households, and you know, not to mention our water heater, our heating up our water as well. So it costs a lot of money to replace all those things. So I'm stuck washing my dishes by hand. So it's not much of an inconvenience, I know, for some of our communities who don't have any drinking water, but it is indicative of what our needs are. And you know, one of the things that that my community has a lot of, I guess, experience on is we just concluded negotiations on our Dunn Lake road improvements, and I'm pretty sure that a lot of the communities across Canada have needs in helping move those discussions along and developing a plan for converting our roads from dirt roads, like Chief Claxton had said, to blacktop. And it took us 30 years. So we started the discussions back in the late 80s, early 90s, and it's been a generational thing for us. If we had Finney in place that could help us do this effectively and efficiently, pretty sure we could have had those discussions down to probably a lot less time than it took, 30 years, you know. So I'm also want to just quickly touch on other infrastructure in our community, and Chief Muskokamon talked about it as well. And that investment for us was around last mile connection, so we could get fiber into, or pardon me, high speed into our community. We're paying about $200 a month in our band office at the time I was on council for each connection for internet, because we had dial-up service. And as you can imagine, we probably had about 50 or 60 of those lines going into our administration offices, because we're all spread out. And we made a $187,000 investment while I was the chief. And that last mile connection allowed us to get rid of all those dial-up connections and get into the business of high speed. And what it allowed us to do as well was now we have fiber connection into all of our homes on my reserve. So I'm about an hour north of Kamloops, small rural community, and 1/3 of our population live on, 2/3 live off. But as probably all of you are well aware, a lot of our business these days is in Zoom calls and using high-speed connections. It's an essential service for us. So, you know, very helpful to have infrastructure like that that improves our quality of life And the last thing I'd like to mention is that I chair our development corporation for the Simcoe Resources Limited. And what that development corporation allows us to do, we're going to make about $30 million net this year. And we're having discussions right now about how to leverage those funds into an investment grade platform that will allow us to, our council to use that for future investment for infrastructure. We're trying to build a band office, health center, and school. And if we have a guaranteed revenue source through FNFA and our own development corporation, we can easily do that. So we're moving, and I'm really looking forward to hearing from the other communities about how you're addressing some of your needs in infrastructure. Thank you, Jason. Thank you very much, Chief Claxton and Chief Muskokamon. Appreciate the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much, Keith. And following on that, I see Davis is sharing the poll results there, which is interesting results. Looks like of the people who say the projects aren't shovel ready, it looks like the leaders on the areas for more planning are strategic and economic, which I have to admit is a little bit of a surprise to me. I would have thought there'd be a little bit more on the, but that's very interesting. Yeah, I'm curious to hear from each of you. I know we have some time left, about just under 20 minutes, but curious to hear from you about your projects. What projects do you have in mind? What are some of the challenges that you're facing with your projects right now? We have this meeting set up like a Zoom meeting, not like a webinar, so we're able to share and have comments. So, geez, I think there's a way. Is there a way to hold up your hand? I think they have that sometimes, or just put up your hand, like your human hand, in the. You wanted to share? We'd love to hear from you.
Jason, I'd like to hear from some of the people about more about their infrastructure projects and what they hope to do in the next couple of years.
Yeah, looks like Lisa wants to share. Lisa, are you there? You go.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lisa Sudan, and I'm the program manager for Chippewas of Kettle and Stony Point Head Start Daycare. I have been here with the facility for 20 plus years. Started out as a classroom teacher, went into resource, was the assistant program manager, and now I am currently the program manager. And we've really outgrown our Head Start Daycare space, as I had put in the comment section, and we're in 2 different locations. So I have accessed some funding, and I'm really raw, I guess you could say, to the whole infrastructure, policies and procedures and stuff like that. But I'm very keen on learning and from others, and I would really like to see, even before I retire at some point here, a new Head Start daycare that would be able to facilitate right from the very young to incorporate even a space for our elders, so that we can have that communication, the back and forth with the elders in our actual Head Start daycare program, having our junior kindergarten program under the same roof, our drop-in outreach program, Kettle and Stony Point as a whole are very, I'll say, they do have a lot of to offer to their community. When I'm thinking about some of these other communities and what they're looking at for infrastructure and what we have, Kettle and Stony Point is very blessed here as a First Nation. And I would even like to have a part of that daycare or Head Start program a space for the youth, so that there's an area for that connection from the very young to the very old, bringing stories, the past, crafts, the culture and the language, into the program, more easily accessible than what it currently is, because we're all in different buildings. So that's just a little bit here about Kettle Point. I know there are other projects that they're working on, but I'm hoping to bring this, well, I have brought it to Chief and Council, and to have it included in our comprehensive plan and moving forward, and just getting even the beginning groundwork completed for this huge project. Miigwech. And I appreciate everything that's been shared today. It's a blessing. I feel very thankful. And Gitchi Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Lisa. You have a beautiful territory, and we had a chance to actually meet with your chief and council and talk about some of your projects, your water and wastewater. So I know, even though it just speaks, I think, to the what you're talking about, the demand for quality infrastructure that all of our communities have. That even though you say you're blessed, you know that there's demand for more, and better infrastructure to support the different programs and services that the nation's offering. And I know you have the Hillside School there, and the the fire department, and some commercial development and cottages. So really, really in a beautiful spot, of course. So thanks for joining us today.
Miigwech.
Just want to provide an opportunity for maybe others to speak to maybe some of their projects that they may have. Oh, Bev,
Nancy,
how are you?
good. I just want to first acknowledge all the speakers that came on the session. Specifically, I could relate to Joe and his presentation on some of the barriers and what it takes to get to a shovel-ready project. Presently, we do have a number of projects that we are working on, and luckily there's some community people that are helping us, because I am out of my league when it comes to what it takes to get a project to shovel ready. So I just wanted to share with you just some of the projects that we're working on. I had mentioned a tech VOC facility in the chat line there. We are looking to do a tech VOC facility to be attached to our high school. And we are at the feasibility study stage of that project. And as Joe said, sometimes it takes a long time to get through the various stages. And certainly we are seeing that with our feasibility study. We are just nearing the end of it. We had hoped it would take us a year. It's taken us much longer than that, because we had concerns with the student projections that came back to us. So we kind of put a halt to it, because we were contesting our student projection numbers. The other project that we're working on, and hopefully in my lifetime that becomes a reality, is Cree Immersion School. We do have Cree Immersion within our elementary programming, nursery to grade 6. We started language revitalization efforts more intensively in 2004. And the only thing holding us back to expanding our Cree Immersion to higher grades is the number of fluent speakers, trained teachers, that is. So we're stopped at the grade 6 level, but we are very serious in terms of looking to revitalize and keep our language alive. Thus, we're at the conceptual stages of a Cree immersion school. I mentioned second level services. We took over our second level services from there's an organization in Manitoba called the Manitoba First Nation Education Resource Center. We exited that organization and took over our own second level service, clinician services. And with that, of course, you need space. And so we are in the middle of completing the work to do we call it an angel room. And this will house our second level clinicians. On staff, we have an educational psychologist, an occupational therapist, and speech language pathologist. So those three are projects that we work on. We also, because we ousted our O&M staff from the wood shop to create this angel space, we now have to create a space for our O&M staff. So we're also working on an O&M shop for our maintenance staff. So we had to pacify them in some way. So we're also including that in our projects. And thank you to Lisa. It reminded me that one of my managers also has plans to expand the Head Start and Daycare Center that we have. That's another area that I'm responsible for. And so there's plans there for expansion of our existing facility too. So that my responsibility is educate more like lifelong, everything under lifelong learning. And so I'm responsible for the secondary schooling, education, post-secondary employment and training, the daycare, Head Start programs. And so I'm only one branch within our community. All the other branches also have various plans, infrastructure projects that they're working on. And so, yes, we do have a lot of projects within our community that we hope to bring to fruition. So I'll just stop with that. I would say thank you.
Thank you so much, Bev. Sounds very exciting in a Cree immersion program, and I'm fascinated that the two examples we've heard so far, both education facilities, something I'd like to learn more about. I know Joe's spoken at length with me about it in the past, about the challenges, and I think you're reinforcing some of those about trying to plan for a growing population, and if it takes so long to get your project funded, now you build your school, all of a sudden your school's at capacity, and you're in a very short time, and how can we plan a little bit better so that the facilities really meet the needs better. So I thank you, Bev, for your comments, and as well to you, Lisa. We do have a couple more minutes. It's maybe time for one more speaker. Anyone else like to share a little bit about projects that they're thinking of or challenges? Russell.
And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Russell Burton. I'm a senior policy analyst with the Southern Chiefs Organization here in Manitoba. We have 34 First Nations, and one of the things that we're looking at right now is developing a water authority similar to what's happening on the East Coast right now. Seems like a very overwhelming project, having come from an infrastructure background myself, but very necessary one. We still have communities that are under boil water here in Manitoba, so I think it's a very important project. I'm also from northern Manitoba, so I recall having to walk down to the lake with my mom in a 5-gallon pail and pull water through a hole in the ice to get water. So it's something that's kind of dear to my heart, and I would like to see move ahead And just thankful for organizations such as yours. I had been working for the province for the last 10 years, so not directly involved with a lot of First Nation activities, but I see that we have some opportunity here, and support is awesome. And I'm hoping that we can move this ahead as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Awesome, Russell. Yeah, thanks for those comments, and such an exciting initiative. I think sounds like your nation's they're taking like what Joe and Alan are both talking about, like let's assert our jurisdiction and assume control for those things that we want to have a positive influence on, and water is certainly what's more important than water. So I know we've been fortunate. We've been talking to the Atlantic Water Authority, um, and I think we maybe have some folks here from some nations that maybe are participating. Tobique and Buckingag. Not sure if you're still with us on the line, but look forward to hearing more about how that initiative is advancing, and certainly some of the things, the ideas about a business case, whether it's a regional organization thinking about projects, or whether it's a local nation. So again, some of these principles really apply in both cases, I think. So glad you could join us today, Russell. I mentioned at the outset that we wanted to follow up with you and to say thank you for joining us today, but also with some more details about this business case. So you should expect an email from us that will include a bit more detail than I showed you on the slides about what are some of the parts of the business case that are important, what are some of the questions to be addressed. Certainly, it obviously has to be thought about in your particular circumstance, and you need to think about these questions. That doesn't provide all the answers for everything, but it's a good framework. It's a tool. It's a way to think through your project. It's a way to think through your business case, and we look forward to continuing to think through those questions, in our future webinars that we're going to be having, one next week. Then there's the national meeting, the First Nations Leading the Way meeting. Some of you may have heard about or seen an invitation. That also is going to be virtual on February 17th, 18th, and we'll be making a presentation. That's a meeting for all the First Nations that have chosen to opt into the Land Management Act and or the Fiscal Management Act. And so, again, the idea behind FINI is to be established as part of the Fiscal Management Act, to be part of that family of institutions, to work seamlessly with those other institutes and those tools. And we'll be presenting there. Then the following 3 weeks after the 18th, we'll also be having webinars. And again, I think we want to be coming and talking about examples of projects and examples of scenarios that you might find helpful as you proceed with your own project. So I just want to we're coming to the final time here, I guess, that we said we'd meet for, and want to thank you again for taking time. We know you have a busy schedule. We thought we'd close with one more poll. This one is really to get a bit of feedback from you, hopefully to help us improve the way we do webinars and engage. And so Davis, if you're able to pop up the final, we just have a feedback survey. We really appreciate your input, and again, my hands are up to you to say thank you for taking the time today, and look forward, and maybe pass it back to Chief Claxton if he has any final words to end our session.
Okay, there we go. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for all those comments and words today. FINI is getting closer and closer to being a reality. And before the pandemic, we were doing a lot of outreach, and anytime we were invited to a community, Jason and I and maybe other team members would go. saw a lot of beautiful communities out there, and we really look forward to when this pandemic is over and we can get back to that, meeting you good people, and look forward to the exciting things that are going to be happening in the future, as well as the future webinars. And I'm very excited about the future. So won't keep up any more of your time, but everyone stay healthy and look after your communities and look after especially the elders and the young people in your community. And look forward to seeing you in the future. Thank you very much.